and welcome to the Harvard Center for International Development's Friday Speaker Series. I'm Dana Yu, a second-year MPP candidate at HKS. Here at CID, our mission is to build a thriving world for all. We work across the university and a global network for researchers and practitioners to build an international pool of talent, convene academic and practitioner networks, and deploy breakthrough research to address the world's most pressing challenges. We are so excited about today's conversation on how Africa leads. I'll talk with One Campaign CEO, Ndidi Okonkwo. Before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Please enjoy your lunch and join us in caring the planet. All food items, including cups, napkins, and utensils, are compostable. Please hold all the questions until she has finished the presentation and has opened the Q&A session. At the time, I will go around with the mic so we can hear you clearly. We are recording the session, but we'll keep the camera on the speaker, ensuring that only voices from the audience will be recorded. The video of this event will be available on the CID YouTube channel afterwards. A CID member may take photos of the event for the use on CID social media channels. If you are not comfortable with your photo being used this way, please let a CID team member know. Please use a QR code located around the room to check in to today's event. This helps the CID team track attendance and cater future events for the audience. Lastly, please make sure to subscribe to CID's newsletter and follow Harvard CID on LinkedIn and Instagram to learn more about our events and stay connected to the CID community. With further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our speaker for today. Ndidi Okonkwo is the president and CEO of the One Campaign, where she brings over 25 years of experience in international development, social innovation, and sustainable agriculture. Her work has focused on scaling impact-driven solutions across Africa, with a strong emphasis on entrepreneurship and food systems. She began her career at McKinsey & Company in Chicago before returning to Nigeria to lead the Fate Foundation and later founding Leap Africa and African Food Changemakers. She also co-founded Sahel Consulting and Ace Foods, advancing nutrition and agribusiness across the continent. Ndidi serves on the boards of the Rockefeller Foundation, Stanbic IBTC Group, and the Bridgespan Group, and the Young Global Leaders of the World Economy Forum. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and BS from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. A former senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's MRCBG, she has also served as a visiting scholar at McGill University and is a TED speaker, author, and a recipient of numerous global honors for her leadership in development and social impact. Thank you all for being here, and Ndidi, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I know there are so many competing events, so you're here and I appreciate it. And it's so good to see friends and mentors in the room. I want to give a special shout out to my mentor and friend, Jay Nelson, and my mama, who is Binta Diop, we're so happy to have you. And of course, to CID and Fatma and the entire team. Thank you so much for this honor and privilege. It's always a great honor to come back to Harvard Kennedy School. I have a big place in my heart after coming here twice for 2 fellowships. Obviously, Harvard Business School was the foundation, but I think Kennedy School has stolen my heart. And to be behind Mama Ellen and President Juan Santos, he sits on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation with me. So I'll send them both pictures of this, that I'm standing in front of them, which is a true honor and privilege, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants, people who have gone before us, and it's an honor and privilege to be here. So I have a quick presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A. Please I would love to be challenged, but also love ideas, because this is work in progress for us at the One Campaign. So the theme is why Africa leads. I'm going to start off by just telling you about what we do, some of the impact we've had, but also what's the current challenges we're taking on and why we need your help on these challenges. So for those who don't know the One campaign, we're 21 years old. We're started by Bono, Bobby Shriver, and Jamie Drummond. In fact, I got to see pictures of Bono at the CID just a few minutes ago, and I will send them to him. One does have a long-standing relationship with Harvard and with many of the scholars who care deeply, and Larry Summers sits on our board. Our mission is to fight for a more just world by demanding the investments required to ensure healthier lives and economic opportunity in Africa. And our vision is that Africa is an equal player. And how do we do this? First, we use trusted data. Data that challenges the status quo, data that raises awareness, data that shapes policy. And if you haven't visited our data portal, please visit it. It's a free portal of development data. We also have in all our 9 offices, government relations teams that really shape policy. We have an office in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels. We have a team in the Nordics, and then in the UK, and then US and Canada. And then on the African continent, we have teams in South Africa, Senegal, and Nigeria. And I'm just coming in from Oslo, where I was a participant and spoke at the Nordic Africa Summit. So these government relations teams are very much focused on shaping policy and fighting for Africa in many governments. Offices. And then we have strategic partnerships with CSOs. We leverage celebrity voices, faith leaders, youth voices, youth champions who amplify our work, but also elevate it and can take on challenges that sometimes me and you cannot. And then finally, we leverage campaigns, and we really believe campaigns are a very important part of the work we do. We were behind the Drop the Debt campaign that was able to partner with the Catholic Church over 25 years ago, when we were still called Data at the time, to get $110 billion forgiven in debt. It's another Jubilee year. We're also partnering with the Catholic Church again, because we believe that some of the debt that is currently on the books of many emerging economies is unfair. We've galvanized about $1 trillion for investment in different causes. We fight for replenishment such as Gavi Global Fund, PEPFAR, because we believe they have a strong return on investment, but we also fight for IDA. And I saw that Ajay Banka was here. We were champions for IDA, and I'm currently a champion for the Africa Development Fund, which is a concessional financing tool that the African Development Bank uses. And it's at a risk of not getting its full replenishment because of the geopolitics that we're currently facing. And so we believe we've had tremendous impact. We were there at the creation of PEPFAR. Many of you don't know PEPFAR, but it's the Presidential Initiative on HIV/AIDS. It was established at a time when HIV/AIDS was killing thousands and millions of people. And one came together under a Republican administration. Then Bush was in office and got support for this very important cause, and it saved 26 million lives. It's one initiative that both sides of the aisle actually believe is a huge return on investment and was a big part of America's soft power on the continent. During COVID, we're able to get about $97 billion secured, pauses on debt repayments, and to fight for vaccines on the African continent. So this has been key, but we know that the world has changed dramatically. And people ask me, are you enjoying your job? Somebody asked me that a few minutes ago, and I said, I don't know one CEO who's enjoying their job right now, but it's a tough time. Often the things we took for granted have shifted. I'm sure that the curriculum at the Kennedy School recognizes that international development as we know it is no longer the same. The concept of international solidarity, the concept of even trade as we know it has evolved and changed. This sentiment, my country first, my family first, me first, means that a lot of the foundations of the work at the Kennedy School, the work at government schools around the globe is being reframed. And one has to change as well. We recognize that as we fight for Africa, we have to recognize both the opportunities and the challenges that our continent currently has. And I often tell people, Africa is not a country, right? It's not. It's complex, 54 countries, very diverse, at different stages of development. And the mistake we often make is to talk about the continent as if it's one monolith. And there are lots of opportunities when we think about our youth dividend, when we think about the critical minerals on our continent, when we think about the opportunities in our continent, but there are also challenges. Many of our countries are debt distressed. They're currently overburdened, and I'll talk a lot more about that. we're facing the brunt of climate change, and I'm sure previous speakers have laid out that better than I could ever. And we're seeing a scramble for our continent, a scramble that mirrors the scramble that occurred in the Berlin conversations when African countries were divided. And this time it's a scramble for critical minerals. So that leads us to really recognize that it's a wake-up call when it comes to domestic resource mobilization. And I love to quote other people, and big sister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala says, Africa, we really need to change our mindset. Access to aid, we have to think about it as a thing of the past. That's her message, not mine. And attracting investment and mobilizing our own domestic resources. And I think that recognition is actually rooted in the African Union Vision 2063 that lays out a very ambitious agenda where Africa owns its own development and is no longer dependent on anyone else for that development. And we've embraced this philosophy at the One Campaign. While we continue to fight for life-saving medicines and humanitarian, so Gavi, Global Fund, our fights that we had for 2025, we recognize that we cannot be dependent on any other world region. So one of the things that we're leading at the One Campaign is the future of health financing in Africa. Basically saying by 2035, at least 35 countries in Africa should be fully self-sufficient in financing their own healthcare. And we have to do that by improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the health spend, unlocking the revenue generation by introducing taxes, driving a health economy that works for our people. And I often say, we have to look at the African youth as the health economy for the world. If the NHS if Africans decided they weren't going to work today, NHS in the UK would shut down, right? Count the number of doctors, African doctors you meet in US capitals, in most hospitals, or nurses or cleaners. Can we leverage that as a dividend for our economies? What about the diaspora? And we've launched, and we're in the process of launching a diaspora health fund and a diaspora remittance fund where we leverage our remittance partnerships to unlock financing for Africa. Can we have debt for health swaps? We've talked about debt for climate swaps. There are many. And then can we reform the global health infrastructure as we know it? That's Gavi and Global Fund, WHO, UNAIDS. Can they exist as the way they have? And that's a tough question to ask in these days, but some people are asking. Because we have to reimagine health and health financing. We have to leverage this moment to build mutual trust and win-win situations. And as I go around Europe and all our G7 countries, I say Africa is looking for partners, but the agency and the agenda has to be owned by Africans. And this message is not often easy to swallow. People have been very used to telling us what to do. And we have also been very used to receiving, so we can't blame anybody else, agendas from other parts of the world. But it's time that we reset those balances. So we're piloting this initiative on the pathway to sustainability in Senegal and Sierra Leone. And people say, these are small countries. Why are you picking small countries? Well, there's political will. We've seen a lot of commitment. And some countries are facing serious debt distress. I don't have to tell you that Senegal is practically facing a huge burden at the moment in its conversations with the IMF. So our vision for health, and I'll stop talking about health in a second, is that we really have to look at basic healthcare as a foundation. We're not replicating state-of-the-art Boston Children's Hospital in every village in Africa. That's not the vision. But we're saying that every child born on our continent must have access to basic healthcare, clean water and nutrition that enables them to live a productive life. And we're looking at key indicators. So not only driving the funding flows from Africa, but also ensuring that we reduce and have under 5 mortality. So that's part of the vision. And we leverage creative voices. We just launched a Diaspora Creative Council during UNGA. It's a great group of creatives, artists, actors who are leveraging their platforms to elevate these issues. We have Ubuntu circles in all our G7 countries and across Africa that are brain trust, and that's really powerful. We leverage social media, traditional media. We have a global faith council made up of phenomenal faith leaders. We believe faith leaders are key to our work. So we have Muslims and Christians and Buddhists, and it's an amazing community. But what I want to dwell on just the next 10 minutes is on this issue of the narrative. Because Africa cannot lead if we're stuck in this old narrative. And what I hear repeatedly as I travel around the world is Africa is a black hole, it gets too much money, it's too risky, and that's unacceptable. So Africa No Filter actually looked at just the cost of negative reporting about Africa and quantified it at $4.2 billion. Just from negative stereotypes. A war in one part of Africa affects the credit rating in another part. How come? Why? in today's day and age, why do we still allow that to happen? And when we think about 2025, I actually think this is a very important year for Africa, not just because we have new leadership. And I know that my sister, Madam Diop, is saying all men. And I know that that is a problem. We still have to address. You've been fighting for that for many years. But we have a new leader at the Afrexim. We have a new leader at the African Development Bank, a new leader at the EU Commission, and South Africa hosting the G20. And the One Campaign fought alongside many of you for Africa to actually be a member, African Union to get a seat on the G20. And we've leveraged this year to address this issue of the cost of capital. Why? Because Africa pays 5 times more than other parts of the world when it comes to debt. 5 times, linked to this risk premium. In fact, the UNDP quantifies that it's about $74.5 billion just from negative credit ratings, and that we could save this amount of money if we had a more objective assessment. Just look at the average sovereign bond rates. Africa pays 9.8%. Germany, 0.8%. Asia, 5.3%. And this is on average. And yesterday I was on a panel in Oslo talking about this. It's shocking that even in sectors that have proven themselves over and over again, like telecoms that has generated 100x return, even in some of the best deals, or 10x, or even 5x, that you're comparing ag investments with telco or with ICT or whatever it is, or even the creative industries. And we have taken this on because our countries need debts to grow. And the debt has to be priced fairly. Otherwise, we cannot invest in infrastructure. We cannot invest in energy access. We cannot invest in a health economy. And so this is a fight that one has taken and South Africa has adopted as part of the G20. And we want to extend it beyond the G20, this G20 year to the G7 in France and the G20 in the UK. More money is flowing out of Africa in debt repayments than is flowing in. So governments have to choose between paying their teacher salaries, the healthcare worker salaries, and paying for Euro bonds or whatever. And this is, for me, a really challenging state of affairs. So we have to do something about it. And I just want to share a video so you can listen to other voices.
Is costing all borrowers in emerging markets and Africa about $15.6 billion in excess interest on loans each year, and even more in terms of lost opportunities.
On average, 17% government revenue go to debt service in Africa, and up to 50% in some countries, compared to less than 5% in OECD countries and around 8% in Asia.
The amount of money that we're spending, paying back or paying interest on our debt is excessive.
On average, African countries pay about 200 to 400 basis points more than comparable developing and emerging economies for the same amount of financing.
We are trapped in a system designed to keep us paying the highest price for capital.
Governments have to choose between serving their people and servicing their debt.
So the more that we pay on servicing that debt, the less we have to devote to other more productive parts of the economy.
All these lead to underinvestment, especially in health, education, and infrastructure, which are vital for Africa's transformation.
Africa is constantly told that its commodities are valuable because they empower others. Everything else, our services, our innovation, our youthness, even our future, is labeled as risky.
If we go through the global financial architecture reforms, the best that can come out of them is that we'll get 10% of the capital that we need.
We need a new credit rating framework, let's say, whereby we have different ways of assessing risk and then different ways of sensitizing the market and maybe using different instruments to give them that comfort in the short term to help reduce the cost.
Data is lacking, and we believe we've got the answer to create the right data to fit into the right profit models for the informal settlements.
What we need is not more compensation or charity. We need a regulatory shift that changes the very rules of the game. So African ambition is no longer penalized as risky, but recognized as a driver of global growth.
This is why UNDP's Africa Credit Ratings Initiative is helping African countries to better understand and also better navigate the credit ratings process.
If the historical data on equity returns of investments made by the IFC, by the African Development Bank, were available in a business-ready format, Then investors could do their own analyses, understand what the risks and returns are.
We've established something called GEMS 3.0, an artificial intelligence platform which brings not only risk data from multilateral development banks, but also brings risk data and transparency from global institutional investors to be able to get real insights across emerging markets in Africa, and as a consequence, reduce the cost of capital.
UNCTAD has been working to identify important solutions in multinational, South-South cooperative, and national levels.
We need sound macroeconomic and financial policies to improve investor confidence and create fiscal space.
We need to stop trying to make investment developmental, and we need to make development investable.
African multilateral banks are going to be critical in the next phase in terms of debt management, in terms of reducing the cost of capital.
We are now available and ready, so it is now the time.
It matters a lot to help improve the life and livelihood of Africans across the continent.
And I hope you recognize that one of the pathways is in partnership with many others, right? Nobody can do it themselves, especially as we reflect on a continent that has 54 diverse countries. So we went out and actually got B20 to take this on as well. I've been to South Africa twice this year on this issue. Our teams have been working hard, and we're so happy to see the emergence of a commitment to leveraging the platforms we have to address the battle. But it's a battle because mindsets are hard to change. Mindsets that are hinged on biases, on, frankly, some racism, and mindsets that are rooted in countries benefiting from others without paying fair prices, or benefiting where they overcharge because of ignorance. And so there are parts of this puzzle that we have to take on, and parts of it that would love your help in taking on. So what needs to change? First, we have to address this systemic bias by redesigning global financial architecture that works for Africans. In fact, many of my colleagues and co-laborers often say that the global financial architecture was designed without Africans at the seat of the table. Many of the institutions we embrace today were designed for us, not by us. And it's time we design structures that work. And I was just in Hong Kong at the Asia Venture Philanthropy Conference. And I was so happy I went because I heard Asians saying, we're designing philanthropy that works for us, by us, hinged on Asian values. We're not copying philanthropy models from the West because they might not apply in our own context. And that was a very bold statement. And I was very proud to see that and to see how family offices are evolving in their own way. And that's the same message when it comes to the financial architecture. We have to invest in data. And I hope many of you in this room are working on the data deficits. I was just in another conference in Paris earlier this week where somebody was saying, DRC doesn't have any map of the soils in DRC or they've never done a mapping of the country. And I said, I am sure they have. Where do you think it's sitting? On some shelf, in some office. Just because it has not been digitized doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But the challenge for us, especially for you young people, is how do you digitize a lot of the great work that exists on shelves so that people don't assume that it doesn't exist and then design for us. And that data infrastructure, to find out with credit rating agencies that 20 of the 54 African countries have never been rated. They don't have a rating because they have not provided the data, they have not engaged the credit rating, they have not paid the credit rating agencies to come and do the analysis. And so they're given probably the lowest common denominator because they don't have and they have not gone through this. We have to support Africa-led efforts to improve policy predictability and investor relations, and we have to change the narratives around investing in Africa. And so they have a long list of things for African leaders to do. And I think for me, the biggest thing is really creating that stability. We've talked to central bank governors. We've talked to the statistical boards in many African countries. The data that we end up giving to OECD or to WHO is 2 years out. When you see OECD presenting 2023 data as if it was yesterday, I'm like, listen, we need data from 6 months ago. The world has changed. How do we have more relevant data that's produced? And how can we trust this data that is accurate, that is seamless? And then we need them to champion a unified voice for Africa. We also need our G7 and G20 leaders to play their role. A lot of the debt Africa has today is not like debt 25 years ago. It's debt from Eurobonds, it's debt from a little debt from China, very little from IMF and World Bank. So we need our G7 leaders, because most of this debt is from their private sector, to actually get involved in ensuring that it's repriced and it's restructured, and that reforms happen so that future debt is actually priced fairly. Same with other sectors. We need the private sector access to do their parts, correcting biases, increasing long-term investment, working with African governments and MDBs, and leveraging technology. And we need civil society and credit rating agencies to play a role. I think nobody, and I hope one student is interested in this, nobody regulates the credit rating agencies. I asked them pointedly, who regulates your work? Who makes sure that what you're doing is fair? The answer was wishy-washy. So who's doing that? How can we incorporate reforms and matrix and make historical data on equity returns viable? And how can we provide sector-specific data so that countries are not packaged as one? One of the people in the video, a professor at Stanford, partnered with IFC, and he's on the expert panel for the G20, and looked at 3 years of IFC investments in Africa, and recognized that the returns on those investments were 6x the S&P 500. Most people don't think of Africa and think of that type of return. In fact, the IFC and the World Bank, and even most recently, one of the fund managers I met said that investing in Africa has been their safest market as a continent when they compare to other continents. But that message is not widely known or accepted or shared. And what we're doing is partnering with many fund managers to elevate success stories and elevate case studies that demonstrate that the investments not only have been safe, but have generated multiples relative to other world regions. We also need civil society and academia to help us shift this narrative, to also use evidence-based campaigns to reshape investor perception, to support data transparency, and to fund efforts to quantify the development dividend and the return on investment.
Borrow your charger, please. Ah, my God. I love that accent. What is that? Is that African? Is it African? Nigerian. Really? Ah, can I have your charger, please? Ah, so exotic. I love it. Wait, I have so many questions. How did you get here from Africa?
Maybe I should introduce this lady, but it's already step playing.
How did you get a phone? Did you just buy it when you got here? You do know that without Africa, you wouldn't have a phone, right? Literally, over half of the world's cobalt, crucial for your smartphone battery.
So I wanted to introduce her before I start playing. So Charity Ekezie is an influencer we work with. And when one first introduced me to her, I met her at one. I said, satire. She uses satire to change narratives. And now she's a TikTok influencer, one of the biggest influencers. She takes on what she's heard from people all over the world. People have told her, oh, you guys have phones in your country. You understand? What language do you speak? Oh, does money grow on trees? So she has been amazing. And when I met her, she actually said at first, she couldn't get a job. She's based in Nigeria because they said her accent for the radio was too local. And so she's maximized this to start taking on narratives. And if you see the exchanges that she has on her Instagram, it blows your mind. So I just wanted to explain for those who are wondering, who is this young lady? So we can finish playing this.
Trees and your electric vehicles come from the DRC, which is in Central Africa, by the way. In fact, we even have our own made in Africa smartphones. So the next time you go to grab your phone and see something negative about Africa, take a minute to actually reflect and realize that without us, you probably wouldn't have that phone. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, when you tell one side of the story, the world gets the wrong idea. Africans aren't just participants in the economy. We are literally transforming it. And that's why I'm teaming up with the One Campaign this Africa Day to just flip the script and celebrate a continent full of culture and innovation and even opportunities. But you missed my first question though. Like, how did you get here from Africa? Did you swim? I want to know. You know what, Natasha? I did swim. Yes, in fact, I swam all the way from the River Nile to this place, and it took me 3 days of fast swimming to get here. And that's how I got to your country. Yeah.
So interestingly, I saw her in Davos. TikTok had brought her, and she flipped the script. She was out in the snow with her, save Davos, save Davos signs, and she does it so well. You know what I mean? She does it really well. So please check her out. She's become a fast friend of mine. And I love people who use satire. I don't know how to use satire, but she uses it in such amazing ways. When we first put our Changing Narratives video out, I actually got messages from all over the world. People said to me, I live in Geneva, and the other day someone stopped me on the road and said, how did you get here? Did you take a boat? You know what I mean? You have planes. And so you might think, why is she saying that? You know, did she swim? That's a question you still get, right? Do you have internet in your house? You know what I mean? Do you have electricity? And that's why I became passionate about changing narratives, because I really feel like oftentimes we have a fixed view of the rest of the world, and we're still positioned in the Tarzan era when many of our countries have moved past the Tarzan era. We also partnered with a poet in Nigeria on another great piece that I wanted to share.
They say Africa is risk. Interesting. But stay with me. You mean Lagos, where fintech rises before the sun? Or Joburg, where Charles LeBron did walk? Or Dakar, where rhythm breaks the rules? Risk? No. This is return. Return on belief. On the girl in Enugu sketching dreams with charcoal. On the boy in Soweto coding futures from a shared laptop. And a Nigerian musician making dreams from a stolen laptop. On the market woman in Kumasi who knows profit without spreadsheets. On justice. For once. You know how to build bruises. Remix scarcity into rhythm. We stretch coins into companies, our sweat, blood, and bodies. We take what the world throws away and say, not so fast, Abiku. Reinvent. You still don't get it. This is not aid. This is alignment. You don't donate to us, you partner, or you get left behind. Because the continent moves quietly, unapologetically. So your hesitation is your loss. Because what we call the innovation 20 years later. We are not waiting for green lights. We are building roads on red. We are not fragile. We are anti-fragile. Our wounds became weapons. Our delays became data. Our waiting made us wise. Africa doesn't need your charity. Africa is your clarity on where the future breathes, on where the world resets, on where value multiplies like cassava after rain. So if you fear risk, don't come. But if you're looking for a return on imagination, on resilience, on tomorrow, welcome. Welcome to Africa.
So we've started these type of messages, and in all our G7 countries, we also do Africa Day, where we show the return on investment for partnering with Africa. There is risk, right? But there's risk everywhere. There are instruments for hedging risk, partnerships, financial instruments, data, applications, but we have to start using the right language. So I really challenge all of us today as we round up and open up for questions and comments to really think about how we become narrative changers. I'd love ideas from you as to what we need to do, because I believe academic institutions are one place to change narratives. I don't think anybody should come out of Harvard and still have a negative narrative about Africa, because you end up becoming policymakers and partners in different parts of the world for Africa and with Africa. The second is champions for pathways to sustainability, right? It's a wake-up call. We've leveled USAID, or somebody has leveled USAID, not we. And like my friend Brian Kagaro says, Father Christmas is not coming this year, right? Governments are waking up to the responsibility that they have a social contract with their citizens, and they have to fulfill that. And we're going to hold them accountable. But we also need partnerships from the rest of the world for affordable financing, patient capital, catalytic capital that is priced fairly, right? So that we can also grow our economies. We also need African financial markets to work for Africans and be priced fairly. So that's a big piece of it. And we'll love Champions for Pathways, a coalition of the willing. And then we need, obviously, new partners who care about advocacy. It's really tough because people don't understand advocacy. They say, what do you do? And what we are ecosystem enablers, right? Corporates understand advocacy. They all have corporate financial, what do we call corporate communications offices, corporate communications. Corporate affairs, corporate affairs. They have lobbyists in Washington or lobbyists in London, but who advocates for the poor? Who advocates for the most vulnerable, right? And that's what activists and advocacy organizations like One do. So I would love your suggestions on how we can galvanize more support for our work. But for me, I always like to think about the future. And I was a student here, how many years ago? 26 years ago, I graduated from Harvard Business School in class of 99. So I'm old, right? I was young when I came, but it's been a long time. And I think about the time between when I was here and now, and I say, you know, what I commit to and what I hope many young students will commit to is a life of impact and a life of service. And so I urge you to think about what part you will play as we redesign this future, an equitable future where Africa is an equal player, where children born on the African continent live their best, most full and meaningful lives, and where we have the opportunity to shape that agenda. So I invite you to join me, and I look forward to celebrating what we can do together. Thank you. I think we'll take some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll take a few questions at the time.
And Ndidi, thank you for sharing. I'm Linda. I'm a first-year policy student here at National Business School, student at Stanford. So great to see Stanford's logo too. Very inspiring data and narrative and great storytelling. I would love to hear some examples of how you go about changing minds. Particularly, if you can share an example of minds that were changed either at an individual organizational level that you didn't expect to, that was hard to change and you actually shifted the narrative. And another example where you wanted to change an organization or a person's perspective and it didn't work out. So an example of success, an example of failure based on what you shared.
Thank you for that amazing presentation. I want to be provocative for a moment, just to play devil's advocate a little bit. When I'm thinking about growth post 1960s in Asia, the Middle East, or Latin America, there's very few spaces where we talk about a continent as a whole or a region as a whole versus maybe a couple of individual country movements like Korea, Singapore, Brazil, etc. So I'm curious, does it help or hurt as you go around the G7 and G20 to think about advocacy for all 54 at the expense of maybe where there really is some breakthrough innovation and political will in certain spaces where you could create your Koreas and Singapores or other examples, and just like how you think about this narrative around an entire continent versus picking and choosing certain spaces. So just kind of curious, like, because it doesn't actually happen that I'm thinking about historically in other continental spaces or narratives of storytelling.
Thank you so much. I'm privileged to be here. I'm a Harvard student studying education leadership, and I always get inspired by this African proverb that says, until the lions learn how to tell the story, all the stories will glorify the hunter. And I think this is an opportunity for us to learn how to redefine our storytelling and how to represent our Africa from where we come from. Now, one thing that I noticed during my studies is how much it resonates with investing in data. For instance, when I'm doing an education policy analysis, but I realized that even when we are using the available data to actually assess our performance as Kenyans in education sector, we don't have enough data in terms of Kenya, like what are we doing right there? So it makes me beg these questions. How do you go about the narrative of changing the mindset into acknowledging how important it is to invest in data in a regional level like Kenya?
Okay, so I think I should take these three. I'm really tired. Usually I can remember everything, but I am old age, jet lag combined. So I'll take the first question on where narratives have been successful and our efforts at One. I would say I started by talking about PEPFAR. And interestingly, in fact, this whole story of One is one of narrative change in terms of our history and what we've been able to achieve. Jamie Drummond, so three co-founders, Jamie Drummond, Bono, and Bobby Shriver. Jamie Drummond tells the story that he actually called Bono once a week for 2 years before Bono joined this effort. That was called narrative change plus perception plus resilience. Dogged resilience. I said when Jamie told the story, I said, I can't imagine calling somebody once a week for 2 years. Where Bono agreed to come along as co-founder until today, he's so committed to this cause, right? Many celebrities prefer to create their own platform. How many of you know that? Since I joined, I've been trying to get a few people to work with me, Trevor. Noah, list them. Who are narrative changers, right? And they prefer, please tell Trevor, I'm still waiting. But they prefer to use their own platform, right? They prefer to create their Bono organization or whatever it is, not to lend their voice to a platform that's bigger than themselves. So that was a narrative change to even get the three of them to work together to co-found this organization and bring many like-minded people together. Now, when the HIV/AIDS pandemic hit, millions of people were dying, right? In many parts of Africa, they were dying in the US. There were drugs, but they were priced at $10,000, right, in the US. So to extend this to African countries at that price point was a lot. To convince Judge Bush to take this on as a fight was about changing narratives, to say, we're going to lean on you because you have a solution. Why should it just be in the US and not in other parts of the world? The US has contributed over $100 billion to PEPFAR. That's a lot of money, right? Now, interesting thing is it's not just contributing the drug, they also invested in innovation. The prices went from treating people at $10,000 to treating people now at $40. Now, with the new innovation with lenacapavir, you actually have 2 pills a day. So we are so close to ending HIV in our lifetime, 2 pills a year in our lifetime. And that was changing narratives. We got country singers involved, faith leaders involved, all sorts of people to keep this momentum going. And that was all about changing narratives, right? And galvanizing stakeholders. The same I mentioned with the debt forgiveness, which took 5 years. So changing narratives is not something that I come and talk to you and tomorrow you become an advocate. We take people on trips. We show them the return on investment. We show them the evidence that their money is making a difference. So that's part of it. Where it hasn't worked, I have to tell you, the last 9 months have been very tough. There's a lot going on in the world. We have the Ukraine, we have the Gaza, we have countries saying me first. We have the NATO 5%. So it's getting harder to convince people that caring about their neighbor matters. Do you understand? So what we're doing is shifting it to say, no, it's a return on investment. So I was on a discussion panel yesterday about the Lobito Corridor. Some of you might be aware of the Lobito Corridor. 3 countries, DRC, Angola, and Zambia, and it's a multi-country railroad with huge investment opportunities and lots of money to be made. But it's mutually beneficial because it allows for value addition and support for critical minerals, which the world needs and which Africa has an abundance of. And so the discussion wasn't come and help poor Africans. It was like, look at the opportunities here. Look at the investment opportunities. Look at African financiers have come alongside, like the Africa Finance Corporation. Can the Norwegian government, can Norfund, can others come alongside private investors to capitalize on this opportunity? It's mutually beneficial. So that's a different argument, right? And that's what we're seeing works. Some people call it commercial diplomacy. Others say it makes business sense. So is it easy to convince people that this is the best place to put your funds, or that it makes business sense, or that you should see me as an equal? No. But I think I always tell people, excellence and integrity have no hiding place. So for us Africans, we have to deliver excellent work with integrity, create an enabling environment to attract the right partners, but partners who are committed to mutually beneficial growth, not one-sided, which Africa has been really on the other side, where so much has been taken away from our continent and we haven't been paid. In fact, one comment, and I'll just mention this, 2 days ago, someone said, so much money has been poured in Africa and it's been wasted. And I said, he said that openly. And I said, excuse me, you're telling me $1 trillion came in. How much went out? At least 5 trillion, right? Why is it that DRC continues to underperform? Is it in anyone's best interest for DRC to get its act together? Then they'll have to pay market rates for all the critical minerals they extract. And today they don't. So I'll leave that there. In terms of the issue you've raised, you're speaking my language, and we have a long way to go. People still define Africa as one country, demystifying that and saying, I mean, why do you want to have a France-Africa summit? Why is it not a France-Nigeria summit, right? Is the Nigerian market not significant enough? And so we are working on that. That's part of the narrative shift, right? And we're actually going to be holding ourselves accountable for these 35 African countries that by 2035 are fully self-sufficient, and obviously ranking them based on their abilities. But that's exactly what I believe. I mean, I've seen what India has done. I've been to India many times. I was on the Godrej board. I just watched that evolution. I was just in Korea. It's amazing, right? To see how Korea has evolved as a country and how it used to be an IDEA recipient and now it's an IDEA contributor. So I think we have a lot to do there and there's a lot of promise. So I'm very optimistic and I would love to partner with you on how we do that systematically. And then the data question, I think we have to monetize data. I think we need young people like you to go back home and get that data from people's drawers and people's shelves on the web. You know, we've been looking at AI. African contribution just to the AI pool today is just 2%. Wiki editors, 2% of them are African. So many of the Africans and friends of Africa, this is an opportunity. Capitalize on it, right? Provide that data, gather that data, and put it in portals where people can receive it. So for me, I'm a big believer in that. And I really think this is time we get it together. I'm very happy to partner with you. One has a partnership with Google through our data platform, and we're scaling data from Africa for the world. Credible data that's going to influence policies, but also shape agendas. Yes.
Hi. So I'm a student here in MPA International Development Program and doing my MBA as well. One sentence in one of the videos you shared really strike me, right? So it was like, we have to think through how can we make development investable. And then another thing you mentioned with the data and access, right? So talking more on the lack of information element. So have you looked into, and I'm just really curious because that's a topic I'm also interested in, is have you looked into how much of like kind of bridging this data gap, because you as an organization kind of invest in a lot of these analytics as well. Have you done surveys with these rating agencies and different people saying, if you were to, in ideal world, have access to XYZ data in ABC kind of projects, how much would you have reduced the risk premium? Because then you can go back and calculate, kind of thinking through larger.
Yes,
yeah.
We've actually great question. I'll just address it now. We've actually compared country ratings, say Sri Lanka versus Venezuela versus, pick Cameroon, to see the disparities. And they are disparities, even with the same, and that's why how you quantify a risk premium and a bias is by looking at countries that have similar indicators just on a national level, then that bias is apparent. So challenging the credit rating agencies, most of them only had one office in Johannesburg. Now they are having to open offices elsewhere. They would fly in for a few hours, check on the, what is publicly available, interview a few people and make a credit assessment, right? And so that's not acceptable to us anymore. And actually the African Union through the APRM is creating its own credit rating agency to kind of check what other countries, and recently AfriExim had a very bad credit rating and they challenged it. They said, we're not accepting that. This is our alternative of what we should be rated. Now there has to be truth in between, but having the ability to challenge credit ratings is critical, right? And holding them to account for how they deliver for our people. So you're spot on, and that evidence needs to be built more and more, and we're starting that process in partnership with others. I'll take 3 questions together, yeah? Or one more? Okay.
Hi, Ndidi. Thanks for coming. I'm Nick O'Donoghue. I'm a senior fellow at the MR CBG and also the former chief executive of British International Investment, the UK's development finance institution, where 60% of, we invested $1 billion a year in Africa. So I don't want to get too technical, but I think it is really important when you're talking about this question of attracting investment capital, whether that's coming through multilateral development banks or DFIs or through the private sector. to distinguish between attracting capital in dollars, which frankly, there's a lot of available capital in dollars. It's too expensive. There is a risk perception that is inaccurate. There is data available. It's there's a GEMS database, and Hubert mentioned it in your video, that sits in the World Bank and the EIB, which they don't make publicly available, despite having had that sort of referred to in G20 communiques and so on. So that's it. That's something that needs to happen. But much more important is to find ways of making local currency financing available. That is much more difficult. And the reason it's much more difficult is because typically you assume a local currency risk, and that historically, even in the 7 or 8 years that I ran BII, of all the countries we invested in Africa, there was almost none of them that didn't have some sort of major macroeconomic or government crisis, which led to a major devaluation in their currency. So it is, I think, really important to distinguish between those and also focus on what we can do to make local currency investing more attractive.
Yes. And the good thing is, under the leadership of Dr. Sidi, the new president of the African Development Bank, he's taking this on as one of his key mandates, actually saying, how can we unlock more domestic capital that's priced in our currencies and also use instruments to hedge them. So your points are excellent. I completely agree. Awesome. So can I take one more? We're out of time. Okay, so let's have Madam Binta.
Time for more questions in the career chat after this.
Okay, let's give Madam the final word here.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to one campaign that I saw the beginning with Bono. And it's great that you are leading, changing the narrative of Africa. I think you are succeeding. Let me add one or two. Africa is going to be 2.5 billion, the quarter of the world, the people, because we need also, in changing the narrative, to talk about the people, the Africans themselves. And we often see that, or hear the people saying that Africans, not just Africa is poor, but Africans are poor, not educated. So I think in the youth of Africa, how do you build in the narrative the contributions of the African? Africa is a big market if you link it to that, So I think that it will be good that also we bring the aspect of the other aspect I wanted to highlight is as you mentioned, the multilateral system is shrinking. You take the Security Council, I don't see the issue of peace and security, because many people will say it's Africa is conflict, is war. You look at now Europe, nobody will say, that is only happening in our country. And we have fixed some war as well. As Liberia, Sierra Leone, you take them in many areas, Angola, Rwanda, etc. Those are good examples. But just another suggestion is to add that on those men that you see, G20, and AU is also part of the G20, is to put Namibia, not just Rwanda, but we have a female president, Namibian, and to have a picture here like you have Mama Ellen Johnson. So women leadership matters so for me, it's really changing the narrative by putting also at the front the people of Africa and the leadership of the young people and the women of Africa. So again, congratulations. You are doing very well. You are still young.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I wanted to recognize Professor Zoe Marks, who was my faculty advisor when I wrote my second book here. You were, and is now heading the Africa Center here at Harvard. So really proud of you and congratulations to you. And thank you to all my friends and folks for showing up, and to CID for hosting this. All right, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Ndidi, for your inspiring talk, and thanks all of you for joining us today. On behalf of CID, we have a small token of appreciation. CID. And just a reminder that we have a career chat after this talk in Rubenstein Building, Perkins Conference Room. So please join us to career talk.